are pouring in. So pull up, crack a beer open, and let the nonsense all begin. That's alright, we'll regret it by the morning. Boston Exile, still awake while takes forming.
Welcome to Boston Exile, wherever you're hiding from your responsibilities tonight. Thank you for joining me. I'm your host, Brad Whitaker. Got a good show for you this evening. Gonna be talking all about day one of Patriots Minicamp, A.J. Brown's first minicamp practice in a New England Patriots uniform. Great offensive performance. Only a little bit to share, but based on what's coming out of minicamp, the offense looks spectacular. Now, it's always hard with these things, right? Because the offense does well. Does that mean the defense didn't do so well? It's always hard to gauge, but judging from last year, in last year's postseason, the defense was the better unit, at least up until the Super Bowl. Actually, neither unit was good in the Super Bowl, but I'm not too worried about the defense. But today looked like the offense may be taking a giant leap forward. One small step for A.J. Brown, one giant leap for the Patriots organization. So I'll be getting all into that. We'll also be talking about the latest on Christian Gonzalez, Kayshon Boutte, and their appearance at Patriots Minicamp, and what's going on there in terms of contract situations, potential trades. We'll break all that down, and then, of course, we'll wrap up with a little bit on the Boston Red Sox. No good news there, of course. No good news to share on the Boston Red Sox once again. But why don't we start with the good news, beginning with the New England Patriots, who opened up minicamp, officially mandatory minicamp today. As I said, A.J. Brown's first minicamp practice in a Patriots uniform. And overall, it was a sharp performance from the offense. You know, I don't know if you can take away too many things from it, of course, but why don't we get into it? This comes courtesy of Greg Bedard's Boston Sports Journal. I highly recommend you subscribe, particularly for New England Patriots content, but they cover all the other Boston sports as well. But going to skip down here about halfway, get through some of the boring quotes a little bit, into what happened at today's practice. So it was a bit light touch. Of course, they're not wearing pads. It is just mandatory minicamp, but the team only ran 2 team periods, but they did have referees on the field. We saw a great performance today coming out of Drake May, who absolutely dominated offensively. Now, this wasn't, 2-minute drill situations. They weren't playing the length of the field. This was exclusively red zone. But as we all know, when you get into the red zone, things start to tighten up a little bit. The defense often has a bit of an advantage there. The defense, if you look back at training camp last year, the defense seemed to be the better unit in the red zone drills. But today, the offense gets all the awards. Drake May seemed very sharp and on time, according to Greg Bedard. His stats, 5 of 6. Touchdown to A.J. Brown. 5 of 5 on scrambles. 5 of 6, a TD to Ramondre Stevenson. 5 of 6 and a TD to Hunter Henry. Total overall, Drake May was 20 of 23 passing in the red zone drill, with 3 touchdowns. And of course, the big highlight coming out of today, which was posted by the New England Patriots, was May threw a couple of back shoulder passes to A.J. Brown in the end zone. One didn't end up in A.J. Brown's hands, but this one, coming courtesy of the New England Patriots, is what's being shared all across social media, with this throw to A.J. Brown on the back shoulder for a touchdown. Looks seamless. And those two have really bonded from everything that I've heard since A.J. Brown got to New England. Brown and Drake May, they're hanging out. They're hanging out outside of the facility. They're becoming very good friends. They're bonding, which is important because, as you know, that worked out really well for Jalen Hurts. Now, Jalen Hurts, of course, was pretty good friends with A.J. Brown, so what's going to happen when you have a game where there's only 3 targets and 1 reception to A.J. Brown? We'll have to see, but I do like to think A.J. Brown, at least playing under Mike Vrabel, who he respects, certainly did not respect Nick Sirianni in Philadelphia. He's going to get his act together just a little bit. But those two, the chemistry is there initially. And on that play, it was defended by Kindle Vildor, which sounds like a German Amazon reading app, but that's actually the cornerback that the Patriots acquired via free agency this offseason. A bit of a journeyman. He's played for a number of teams over the years. I think he played for the Bucks for a short while. He's been all over the place, but he's going to be like 4th or 5th on the depth chart when it comes to the cornerback position. Just a bit of a depth piece, but he got burned there. Clear mismatch against A.J. Brown. And Drake May, look, he's been very good at those back shoulder throws. And having A.J. Brown, where that's really his bread and butter, it's more than just the deep shots, the speed downfield. That's going to work a lot, whether it's in red zone situations, whether it's just a quick 3rd and 5 situation. Drake May and A.J. Brown, this is going to be a connection for years to come, and I'm really looking forward to seeing it. And it's amazing to see that chemistry continue to build up. Tommy DeVito also had a pretty good practice. As Greg Bedard noted here, there was a touchdown negated from Tommy DeVito to Kayshon Boutte, who I'll get to in just a second. DeVito, 1 of 3, scramble 3 of 3. I'm not sure how to read Greg Bedard's stats, to be honest, but I'll just go through the total. Tommy DeVito, 11 of 3. I don't know why Greg Bedard lays it out this way. I guess this is the way he reads things, and then he just copies and pastes it into a word processor, and it goes into the CMS, and next thing it's on Boston Sports Journal. Again, I love Boston Sports Journal, but this is very hard to read. But overall, Tommy DeVito, 11 of 13 passing with a touchdown, a scramble, but he did also have a fumble as well. So here's some of the overall stats, though, from the red zone drills today. Went over it just for a second. This is a bit easier to read. Hunter Henry, 4 of 5 on red zone targets. Good to see Henry performing. Douglas, 5 of 5 in the red zone. Pretty good for a small guy. Stevenson, 4 of 4 with a touchdown. Brown, 2 of 3, of course, including that back shoulder touchdown catch. Romeo Doubs, who, at least from OTAs, has not really stood out very much and certainly didn't stand out at the Drake May softball game, and I don't think he's ever going to live that down. I'm probably going to bring that up on every single podcast, at least until the regular season starts. But he was 2 of 2, and Jack Westover, 1 of 2 as well. And then you had some of the backups coming out. I wouldn't call them backups. These guys are going to get plenty of playing time. But with Tommy DeVito, Efton Chisholm was 4 of 5 in the red zone. Kyle Williams, 3 of 3 with a touchdown. Mac Hollins, 2 of 2 on a touchdown that came on a trick play. Kayshon Boutte, 1 of 2. Eli Raritan, the new tight end drafted out of the University of Notre Dame, he was 1 of 1. And Stevenson was 1 of 1 with Tommy DeVito. So, really impressive performance overall by the offense today. And as you can see here, Robert Spillane was beaten on touchdowns by Henry and Stevenson. Probably the down of the day, according to Bedard, but he is coming back from an offseason procedure. Elijah Vera-Tucker was limited in terms of snaps, but Ben Brown got a lot of work at that left guard position. And Andrew Rupkich, we'll see if he makes the team, considering I don't know his name, but Ben Brown will certainly have a spot on the roster. Caleb Lomu, of course, the tackle, who's probably going to be a swing backup tackle before assuming one of the tackle roles in year 2. He took a couple of snaps at the left tackle spot, which is interesting, with the second group before quickly giving way. And then about the same for on the much of the offensive line, Marcus Bryant at left tackle, James Hudson, and then Demetrius Crownover also got some time at the right tackle position. Greg Bedard also notes that Caleb Lomu moved well. He and Marcus Bryant both did a good job picking up a couple corner blitzes. Protection seems solid. Jared Wilson allowed 1 pressure up the middle. So I am a little concerned about the Jared Wilson thing. Garrett Bradbury was okay last year. I think we overrated him perhaps a little bit. You shouldn't be giving up a lot of pressures up the middle in the NFL. This was Jared Wilson's role, playing center at the University of Georgia, his final year. But, I think that could be the biggest potential flag on that offensive line. I think Owenu is going to be fine. Hopefully he's in shape. Of course, Morgan Moses, going to get limited reps considering his age, how long he's been in the league, but he'll be fine at right tackle. Will Campbell, we'll see what happens. I love the Elijah Vera-Tucker signing if he stays healthy. But the center spot, moving Jared Wilson there, is going to be a bit of an experiment because they experimented with it last year at training camp, and it didn't work out so well. And they very quickly moved him over to the left guard spot where he was actually able to move as a starter. But Bedard notes defensive coaches and players were not happy, but in a joking fashion, with the sideline after they called a trick play for a touchdown and then a screen right after that. But it was all in good fun. So, not super serious. It's mini camp. Thought I'd get to this interesting Nick Cattles tweet who's talking about A.J. Brown. Because all we've been hearing about, especially from Philadelphia, we heard about the LA Rams. They weren't interested in trading for A.J. Brown because they had concerns about his knee. And then Elliott Wolf, being the rebel that Elliott Wolf is, said, hey, to the Eagles, if you can get a first and second round pick from the Rams, you should go ahead and do it, knowing that that probably wasn't going to happen. But the Rams were part of those conversations, more than I think they would have liked to have led on. But all we've been hearing about, especially from the Philly fans, as I said, is A.J. Brown's knees, how banged up he is, how that's going to work long term. But Nick Cattles points out, A.J. Brown's knee is an issue, and he's not the same guy. But also, his usage in the QB play last year were atrocious. And two, here are his snap percentages in Philly. And I think this is going back to the last 4 years. So 4 years ago, 91%, then 86% of the snaps he was on the field, then 89%, and then was down to a low of 85% last season. So, mind you, Stephon Diggs had a terrific season last year in New England. I'm still in the bring back Stephon Diggs camp, as most Patriot fans are, as unrealistic as that may potentially be. But he was only playing about 50% of the snaps. A.J. Brown is going to be on the field the vast, vast majority of times. So, as Cattles points out, that's a lot of snaps. If the knee was a major obstacle the last 4 years, it's perfectly reasonable to believe with improved QB play usage and more management, he's better than he was last season. So, I think A.J. Brown, look, we know he's happy to be in New England. He grew up a fan. The relationship with Vrabel, we've talked about it ad nauseum, but this is going to be a real opportunity for him. He just barely cracked 1,000 yards last season. It was considered a down year relative to some of the other seasons with A.J. Brown, but he's going to get a lot of usage this year. He's going to be a primary target for Drake May, and if he's not, that means he's going to be dishing it out to Romeo Doubs, to Mario Douglas, to Mac Hollins, to Efton Chisholm, to Kyle Williams. If it's not an A.J. Brown game, it's going to be reception by committee out there, and then certainly I think there's going to be a few A.J. Brown games out there, but looking at the chemistry early on, looking at the back shoulder throws, it's been nothing but positive news so far since A.J. Brown arrived in New England. Some other news coming out of today, big news, of course, the punter spot. We all saw the concerns last season with Patriots punter Bryce Behringer. Story coming out today, rookie punter joins Patriots for minicamp tryout. Rookie punter Devin Bale out of the University of Arkansas. He's jumped all over the place throughout his college career. I think he's played for a couple of schools. But he came into Tuesday's practice on a tryout basis, wore number 6, if that's something that's important to you. But he was active. He got involved out there. This is a clear competition right now at the punter spot between this Bale guy and Bryce Behringer, who really put the team in a bad spot in the AFC Championship game with some of those punts. I saw it firsthand. It was atrocious, and I know the weather conditions weren't great, but, you need some guy who's going to punt the ball well in New England because you're going to have lots of games in bad weather. So, of course, why not go with a guy from Arkansas, right? That makes a ton of sense, right? They deal with all sorts of snow and ice storms there. Although they seem to have a tornado like every other day. So maybe he's been punting in tornadoes. We don't really know. But Bale is not taking up a spot on the Patriots roster because it is considered a tryout spot. However, if the team does want to add him, they need to officially sign him to a contract. This comes from 98.5, the Sports Hub, via Alex Barth. But it is going to be a bit of a position battle between these two. I think Barth went into the stats a little bit here. Actually, I don't know if you can see it, but a little news on Bale. He had a 4-year college career, spending his first 2 seasons at Northern Colorado. Okay, Northern Colorado, probably played in the ice, the snow, the cold wind, all of that. Last year for the Razorbacks, punted 35 times for a net yardage of 39.5 yards per punt. Tell me if that's good. I know that sounds good to me, but I'm not sure. That included 4 touchbacks and 15 punts down inside the 20-yard line. That I know is good. He had an average hang time of 4.06 seconds. So Behringer kind of on the hot seat right now after some trouble there in the postseason. As Barth notes, he averaged a career low 40 net yards per punt last season, with 32 of his 78 punts downed inside the 20 and 5 touchbacks with an average hang time of 4.38 seconds. Now, my math may be off, but those still seem like better numbers than Bale had in Arkansas. So how much is this, what's his name, Devin Bale. How much is this guy gonna improve from college into the pros? We'll have to see, but the Patriots, of course, trying to figure out if they can find an alternative at the punting spot. If not, perhaps they'll dig a little deeper. They'll ride it out with Behringer one more year and try to figure out a replacement in next year's draft. But the biggest news, of course, coming out of minicamp was Christian Gonzalez and Kayshon Boutte. We didn't know if those two were going to appear at practice, and indeed, they were there. So this comes from NBC Sports Boston. This was kind of a real-time blog, but they say wide receiver Kayshon Boutte was in attendance after missing voluntary workouts earlier in the offseason. He's been subject of trade rumors of late, but he indicated he hopes to stay in New England while speaking with reporters on Tuesday. And then, of course, star cornerback Christian Gonzalez, who is eligible for a massive contract extension, also participated in practice, albeit to a lesser extent. So that's really good news. First off, Kayshon Boutte, we all thought he would be gone, right? And as I've said, if the Patriots are actually interested in Stephon Diggs, I don't think there's a spot for Kayshon Boutte. I'm not sure there's a spot currently because A.J. Brown takes that X-boundary role. Of course, we know McDaniels moves receivers around a little bit, so I don't think that's as big of a deal as some make it out to be. Also, there just doesn't seem to be a lot of interest in trading Boutte for whatever reason. I mean, he's continued to get better year after year. Splashed during the postseason, particularly that one-handed catch in the divisional round against the Houston Texans. And nobody seems to be interested in him. And we were saying, like, okay, maybe a middle-round pick. The Patriots will trade Boutte and get a 4th or a 5th, but they haven't even gotten that. So maybe they're going to ride it out with Kayshon a little bit. And perhaps he does have a spot on this roster. And as I've said before, look, if you aren't going to bring in Stephon Diggs, I think you keep Boutte. I mean, it doesn't really hurt. Yeah, he is kind of a lesser A.J. Brown, less size, less speed, worse hands, but he's young. He's still cheap. You have him on a rookie contract for another year, and you're really only trading him for 1 season left on his contract at this point. So, you give him another year, see how he contributes. I mean, he's going to contribute. Is it going to be a career year in terms of receptions as it was last season? I don't think so, because now he's competing with A.J. Brown. But, if this, as of June 9th, is the Patriots wide receiver room, then I think you keep Kayshon Boutte because, I think you have a little bit more use for Douglas and Chisholm and Kyle Williams because they bring something a little bit different than Kayshon Boutte does, and it's already crowded. You have 2 large wide receivers that can play on the outside, although Hollins lines up in the slot a bit more, but so that kind of lowers Boutte a little bit, but I mean, I would still think Boutte would be ahead of Mac Hollins on the depth chart. So, I don't know, Kayshon Boutte was in practice today. It's not like he was getting a ton of reps, but he did get reps out there, and he got more than Christian Gonzalez, who was very limited at today's practice, but he was still out there. It kind of a hold-in situation for Christian Gonzalez as he works out a potential contract extension. And, look, I have to give credit to both of these guys, because, especially Christian Gonzalez, because they had every reason not to show up. And yeah, maybe there's fines involved. I don't know. Minicamp's short, right? I mean, you miss a few days, you send a message. I'll be honest, if I were in Christian Gonzalez's shoes, I would probably not show up. Like, I want my big payday. Why would I show up, risk injury? Now, it seemed like the Patriots had that in mind, considering he was limited. They didn't want him to get hurt out there. We saw what happened in training camp last year with Christian Gonzalez. So he was out there only a little bit today, but a credit to both of them for showing up, being there in spite of all of this uncertainty. You know, Christian Gonzalez is going to, I think eventually they'll come to an agreement. He'll be out there week 1, assuming he stays healthy. Kayshon Boutte is a little bit more uncertain, but, you know, he's showing up, and you have to commend both players for doing that. They're putting the team first and not themselves first. They are a bigger man than I am. I probably, if I were in Christian Gonzalez's shoe, I would have said, I'm not going anywhere near the field until I get that contract extension. And he's out there, and he's participating in off-site activities. He was at Drake May's softball game playing. Excellent swing, by the way. Christian Gonzalez could have had a career in baseball if he wanted to. And look, I get it. Like, Brad, I don't care. Like, I'm working a W-2 job. I can barely afford to put food on the table. I can't pay rent next month. Like, how much am I going to really care and praise Christian Gonzalez for, you know, millions of dollars that he's going to get on top of the few millions of dollars that he's already made? But Steve, let me just say, let's call him Steve. Steve, let me just, why don't you just close your eyes for a second and try to empathize a little bit with these multimillionaire superstar athletes, okay? I know you're going through a tough situation, but let's just try to empathize a little bit. Like I said, I think Christian Gonzalez had every reason not to show up. And his agent perhaps was telling him not to show up. And he put the team first today. He put the team first. He's making the appearances whenever it's mandatory. He's still involved in the community, doing all of those nice, the Patriots cares type things. And yeah, I know it's not going to move the needle. He's not struggling to put food on the table like you, Steve. But, you know, this is ultimately a business, and Christian Gonzalez is still taking a risk going out there. Kayshon Boutte has every reason to be pissed off. I think Kayshon Boutte has more of a reason to be pissed off. I mean, this was a guy who, put yourself in this other multimillionaire superstar's shoes, although he's probably made a lot less money than Christian Gonzalez. Does he make $1 million a year? I'm sure he does. He was, I think, a 6th-round draft pick. But Kayshon Boutte was I believe he was a 5-star recruit out of high school, had a terrific first season at LSU. Coaching changes happened there, and next thing you know, he's not participating quite as much. Dealt with some injury issues. Bill Belichick took a flyer on him in the 6th round, along with Demario Douglas, and he was very good in training camp. And next thing you know, he found himself in the Belichick doghouse after not putting his 2 feet down week 1 against the Eagles, and barely saw the field the rest of the season. Then Gerard Mayo comes in. Boutte builds himself up a little bit. Now, to be fair, that receiving core with Gerard Mayo was horrendous. I think Juju Smith-Schuster was their best receiver. Douglas was a little bit better. But Boutte was kind of the best guy out there, worked his way up. And then last season, you know, we were talking about Kayshon Boutte before training camp, like he was going to be on the chopping block. Struggled to make the roster. Oh, they're going to pick Jalen Polk in year 2 over Kayshon Boutte. Kayshon Boutte was the biggest highlight guy on the team at the receiver position. And now he finds himself dealing with this A.J. Brown trade, hearing all offseason that he's going to be traded away after having a terrific postseason, a terrific regular season, where all he's done is get better and better and better, dealing with the injuries in college, all of the various setbacks, the setbacks when he first came into New England under Bill Belichick. And now he finds himself as kind of a well-known name, you know, kind of a laughing joke, a laughing pun when it comes to the national broadcast with the Boutte last name, but he is still contributing and doing an excellent job, and he's looking to improve in the 4th year of his NFL career. Now he has to deal with all this background noise. He has to compete with one of the best big-bodied receivers in the NFL, and he's still there. So empathize a little bit with these guys, Steve. I know it's tough. I mean, you might have to give up that apartment, that studio apartment in Chelsea. I don't think it's worth $3,000 a month. You think I My number one choice was to be mowing the lawn in 90-degree weather and 100% humidity in South Texas. No, that was not my first choice in life. But guess what, Steve? I have a lawn. And yeah, I am getting bitten by flesh-eating flies that lay maggots in your skin in South Texas, if you've heard the news. I'm dealing with all of that. But you know what? At a certain point, you have to just recognize that the boomers, they're all moving to New England. They have a lot more money than you do, and they're going to buy your place instead. And, there's plenty of room for you down here in South Texas. And if that's not the American dream, I don't know what is. Abandoning your childhood home for a bunch of boomers to live out the best last years of their life and moving down to a place where you don't know anyone and you're away from your favorite sports teams. If that's not the American dream, I don't know what it is. So, Steve, chin up a little bit. Things can be better, but yeah, you really $3,000 a month for a studio apartment in Chelsea. It's not even that nice. Chelsea's not even that nice. The apartment it was a room that they converted into its own studio apartment. You don't need to be there. Come down here to Texas, Steve, and then we can talk all about the millions of dollars that we're not going to be making for the players of the New England Patriots. So that's what's going on with the Patriots. Good first day of minicamp. You have to say it's a good first day with Drake May. Put on a ton of muscle this offseason, thriving in the red zone drills where we've seen him struggle before in previous training camps. And now he has a weapon. Now he has a real weapon. It's going to make life a lot easier for some of the other receivers. And I'm still holding out a little bit of hope for Stefon Diggs that, he still remains unsigned. Maybe there's something going on there. I talked about last week on the podcast that Zolak, I don't know how great his sources are, but he was indirectly saying that Stefon Diggs, don't throw away the jerseys quite yet. He may be returning to New England. So, positive first day of Patriots minicamp. We'll see what happens the rest of the week and how that plays out. I would assume this is going to be the only red zone day. They'll probably do 2-minute drills at the end of minicamp. I'm sure it's going to be more midfield stuff tomorrow. That's usually how these work. But, they're not wearing pads, of course. It's training camp will be a better indicator. But, the Patriots, as I mentioned, they're 14th in ESPN analytics right now. They're the 14th ranked team in the NFL after coming back from the Super Bowl. The 15th ranked team was the Denver Broncos. So nobody's buying the Patriots right now. They think it was a cupcake schedule, which it was. Let's be honest. It was a cupcake schedule last year. But, they're better than the Bills. I think they have a better roster than the Bills. I think they've done more work on their offensive line. It's hard to argue Drake May's a better quarterback than Josh Allen just based on their historical careers. But he was better last year, certainly, second in the MVP race. I don't see how the Patriots aren't the favorite in the AFC East right now. But, of course, the Buffalo Bills were number 2 in those ESPN analytics, even though they didn't really have a big splash offseason. I mean, we stole their fullback. Who they were a lot more dependent on than I think a lot of fans are making out. Bills fans were pissed about that, by the way. So, look, it's going to be a tough schedule. I think 13-14 wins might be an unreasonable expectation, but 11-12, competing in that division. Bills also have a very challenging schedule. They still have to play all the NFC North teams. Second place schedule with the rest of the division, but it's analogous to what the Patriots are dealing with. It's going to be tough for them to get to 11-12 games. The Jets, we know they had a terrific offseason. We hear about it every year. The Jets nailed the draft, A+ draft, New York Jets, and then at the end of the season, 3-14. So I'm not too worried about them. And then, of course, the Miami Dolphins got rid of Tua, and they're in a full-on rebuild. So you still have a cupcake division, despite the tougher schedule. I think the Patriots have a real shot at, and not just winning the AFC East, but, contending once again for a spot in the Super Bowl out of the AFC. And it's going to be interesting, that Week 1 game at Seattle. Seattle definitely downgraded a little bit of their roster. They lost Kenneth Walker, who ran all over the Patriots last year. I think I wouldn't pick the Patriots, but I think that's going to be a tight game. I really do. I'm going to be there in Seattle, so really looking forward to that. Week 1 opener on Wednesday night. It's on Wednesday now. Too many games in the middle of the week. I was fine with the Thursday thing. We all like the Monday Night Football, first day of work. a little tired. Good to put on some football, but I do enjoy the majority of the games being on Sunday. But yeah, that's it for the Patriots today. Moving on, I'm going to talk a little bit about the Boston Red Sox. They dropped another one, game 2 of 2 on the road against the Tampa Bay Rays. 4-3. Patriots. The Red Sox rallied a little bit there late, but still not enough offense. As we've said many, many times, if the Red Sox just had the league average 4.5 runs per game, they would have one of the best records in baseball. Peyton Tolle, not his best performance, but still a good performance, right? He gave up 4 earned runs. That's a bad game for Tolle, but it doesn't matter. In order for the Red Sox to win, you need your pitchers to only give up, in total, across 9 innings, 1 to 2 runs, because you can't expect the Red Sox to score more than a couple of runs, and that's been the real issue. And of course, as we've been harping on, I think a lot of this comes down to Craig Breslow, the GM, or whatever his title is, in the Red Sox front office. And this news broke yesterday. This comes via Boston.com. I believe Boston Globe ultimately broke it, but I'm sorry, I'm not going behind the paywall and doing all that crap. I'll read Boston.com. But Red Sox reportedly not considering firing Craig Breslow. The club's ownership hierarchy has not even discussed making a change. This comes from Connor Ryan of Boston.com, quoting Tim Healy of the Boston Globe, who wrote on Monday night, the Red Sox are not considering firing Chief Baseball Officer Craig Breslow. Well, there's your title for you. A team source said on Monday night. Further, amid the team's underperformance and speculation that Breslow may be on the hot seat, the club's ownership hierarchy has not even discussed making a change, the source said. So, Craig Breslow is here to stay. And, there were some rumors swirling a little bit last week, over the weekend, that perhaps the Red Sox were finally going to make a change, especially as you head into the middle portion of the season before the trade deadline. You're going to have to make some offseason moves. Big debate about whether it's going to be a fire sale. You're going to get rid of Aroldis Chapman, because what's the point if you're going to have a closer just sitting in the bullpen all game long? Or if they can kind of turn things around a little bit, maybe you add a bat or two. And that's really all this team needs. And we don't know when Roman Anthony's going to be back. We don't know when Garrett Crochet is going to be back, but the pitching isn't the issue. It's the offense. And, if this team can start to get on a little bit of a winning streak, get a little bit closer to 500, especially in the American League, well, then maybe you visit the conversation about making some additions. But I don't trust Craig Breslow to make those decisions. Of course, is it going to be a fire sale? It's starting to lean that way, because the Red Sox are now 11 games under 500 for the first time since 2020. So I don't know why Craig Breslow is even the GM at this point. I don't know why he was the GM heading into 2026. Let's just go through some of the things that Craig Breslow has done during his tenure since assuming that role. Okay, so in December of 2023, you had the Chris Sale trade. Traded to the Braves for Vaughn Grissom. Remember Vaughn Grissom, big contributor. Sale, of course, has excelled since that trade. Won the Cy Young last season. Grissom struggled in Boston and was later moved. It has been cited as a major regret. Okay, so the Chris Sale thing didn't work out. And look, I get it at the time. Chris Sale, he couldn't stay healthy. Had some of the worst luck I've ever seen from a starting pitcher. But, you have one of the best left-handers in Major League Baseball. You probably should ride it out a little bit with Chris Sale. Considering how it ended up working out afterward. One of the best pitchers in baseball, the best pitcher in baseball, arguably, last season. So you had the Chris Sale disaster. And of course, last year, you had the Rafael Devers trade, June 2025. This was all because Devers was not happy that they brought in Bregman. And then Bregman, despite being a Gold Glove third baseman, Devers wanted to stay at third. And then they talked about, okay, well, Devers can DH. Maybe he can play some first. And Devers didn't like that. And he didn't want to play first base. Of course, now he's playing first base every game for the San Francisco Giants. So that could have worked out had that been managed a little bit better. And a lot of people blame Alex Cora for that. And I'm not saying Alex Cora isn't at fault, but I think a lot of that had to do with communication coming from the front office, which, as we know, is not Craig Breslow's specialty. So they traded Rafael Devers. They brought in Kyle Harrison and Jordan Hicks. I don't think Hicks is around anymore, and Kyle Harrison, of course, was traded this past offseason for a guy who goes by the name of Caleb Durbin, who's been a disaster at third base. Kyle Harrison, meanwhile, similar to when Chris Sale got dealt, is now one of the best Cy Young contending starting pitchers in the National League. So, obviously, that created some friction, alienated the fans, and the return was non-existent. You basically flipped Rafael Devers for Caleb Durbin, who, was allegedly a great fielding third baseman. He's had his moments, but he had a play today that was just horrendous. And of course, he can't hit the ball in the air outside of the infield. So, Caleb Durbin, been a disaster. You basically flipped Devers for Durbin and got rid of one of the best young pitchers in baseball, who ended up spending most of his time at AAA Worcester. That was also a Craig Breslow decision. Then you had the Alex Bregman situation. Bregman, remember, signed a 3-year, $120 million deal before the 2025 season, but did have an opt-out before 2026, which he took because he had the chance to make even more money. I don't blame him for that. So the Red Sox, of course, made a little bit of an aggressive push, as they say, to sign Alex Bregman and bring him back. But Bregman ultimately left for the Chicago Cubs on a 5-year, $175 million deal. Now, what did the Red Sox offer him? They offered him a 5-year, $165 million deal. So they couldn't give him $10 more million. Mind you, this is across 5 years to come to Boston once again. And the Cubs also sweetened the deal a little bit. There were better terms. There was a no-trade clause, whereas the Red Sox, the deal was filled with a bunch of deferrals and no full trade clause. So I think the Red Sox could have matched the Cubs. They could have said, hey, 5 years, 175, maybe we'll give you 5 years at 180. And that probably would have been more than enough for Bregman. He seemed to enjoy his time in Boston. He was like an additional manager out there. Remember when he got injured, he was coaching up the offense. He was coaching up the pitching staff on hitter tendencies because he's been around the league for a long time. And so you didn't just lose, one of the better bats and one of the better fielding third basemen in the Major League Baseball. You lost a real leader and a guy who could substitute as a manager on the bench, which would have been helpful considering you fired Alex Cora and most of the managerial staff for the Red Sox. So that was a disaster. And then, of course, this past offseason, Red Sox allegedly were in some negotiations with Kyle Schwarber. We remember that didn't work out because Schwarber had a great season with the Red Sox, and then they weren't able to come to terms on a deal. Ended up becoming one of the best left-handed hitters in Major League Baseball after that. So the Red Sox, they dipped their toe in the pool again this offseason. Couldn't come up with a deal with Schwarber. He returned to the Philadelphia Phillies. There was the Pete Alonso disaster. I don't think that even got close. So the Red Sox weren't able to add him as well. What else did Craig Breslow do? There was the Walker Buehler move. They paid him, like $20 million a year or something like that? What was the Walker Buehler? Let me look this up really quickly. Yeah, Walker Buehler. 1 year, $21 million deal. And then, of course, underwhelming production relative to costs and expectations. So that didn't work very well. So that's been the resume for Craig Breslow. And I know we all kind of lump him in with Chaim Bloom, who was also a disaster. You had the Mookie Betts trade, the Trevor Story signing, Masataka Yoshida, who we all love Masa, but he's a one-tool baseball player. He's been injured. He hasn't lived up to expectations, certainly not 5 years, $90 million that he's been paid. The failure to retain Xander Bogaerts. It's all kind of lumped in. Chaim Bloom, Craig Breslow. So we all kind of treat them as one and the same. Of course, only one of them actually has a soul. Breslow, I would say, has actually been a downgrade from Chaim Bloom. And here's this story that broke about a week ago. New Red Sox rumors on Craig Breslow advised to have interpreter by multiple officials. Craig Breslow speaks English, so why does he need an interpreter? Well, according to Tim Healy of the Boston Globe, again, I'm not going to read the story because of the paywall, over the past month, Breslow has made a concerted effort to have more conversations with players and clubhouse-level personnel. Part of the point is telling them he cares about them and winning, and he is there to support the team. Okay, people talk externally about not a ton of diversity within the operation in terms of experience, one MLB executive said. Lee continued, the coaching staff has grown frustrated with the state of player development, specifically how much emphasis is placed on swing mechanics and hitting data, often at the expense of fundamentals. The imbalance, coaches believe, traces back to the Chaim Bloom era and is only accelerated under Breslow. So again, one of the same. One has a soul, the other does not. And because of the soulless nature of Craig Breslow, they are considering bringing in like an emotional support human, not an emotional support animal, but an emotional support human that is going to help Craig Breslow. Breslow played 12 years in the big leagues, and that experience was seemingly a selling point when Boston brought him aboard in 2023. He'd ideally convey analytically driven ideas in a way that more traditional baseball people could not understand. So let's see what's going in here. Instead, there's a perception the retired pitcher has leaned more into his Yale self than his player self. People talk externally. I read that already. He's either an extremely principled executive who deploys model-based decision-making, as one friendly put it, or woefully beholden to algorithms, as the less-than-friendlies often do. So, here's what's going on here. Scrolling down the article a little bit more. Euron little has improved on the front despite Boston firing Alex Cora. They essentially handed Craig Breslow the roles. But they're basically planning on bringing in an interpreter-like figure that's going to help Craig Breslow communicate with the team a little bit. And, one would assume that if you are going to be the head in the front office, the president of baseball operations, the GM, whatever title you're giving, there has to be some level of emotional intelligence there. Some ability to communicate with the players in the clubhouse, with the coaching staff. Obviously, things were rough between Alex Cora and Craig Breslow, and they said, look, it's Cora's fault. It's not your fault, Breslow. It's your show. We'll give you the reins. And this has continued to get worse and worse. And as I mentioned in the track record, nothing really has worked out all that well. It's always been my opinion, although I'm not saying Alex Cora didn't deserve to be fired, but it's always been my opinion that this has been more of a Breslow issue than it was an Alex Cora issue. But at the end of the day, this starts at the top. This starts with ownership. This starts with John Henry, who decided back in 2019, after they won their fourth World Series title under the current ownership, that they're going to focus a little less on trying to win baseball games and a little bit more on diversifying their portfolio. So let's go through John Henry's portfolio a little bit. I know, very exciting stuff here. Liverpool FC. This is in addition, of course, to the Red Sox. It was acquired in 2010 for about $477 million, about $500 million for Liverpool. They have been successful in terms of both performance and financial returns, but of course, that's diverting attention away from the Boston Red Sox. They took a controlling stake of the Pittsburgh Penguins in 2021 for a $900 million evaluation. It's a financial win for the Fenway Sports Group, but the on the ice results have not really panned out in Pittsburgh. No Stanley Cups, number of playoff misses, and early exits when they did make the playoffs. Of course, they've been involved in the racing world since 2007. Started as Roush Fenway Racing. Now it's RFK Racing, I would assume named after the head of Health and Human Services. 50% stake in RFK Racing in NASCAR. Competitive, but not really a dominant racing group. Also really has not been a bigger financial need for them. It's just kind of a steady diversification play. Of course, Boston Globe reacquired in 2013 for $70 million because Print journalism, as we know, is on the ascension. So that was something that John Henry did. But all of this is taking away from the Boston Red Sox and the desire to win baseball games. And I think the way John Henry looks at it is, look, we have Fenway Park. We have the mecca of baseball in the entire world. Fans want to come here from all over the globe to see games. We're going to fill the stadium to a certain extent, if not with our fans, with fans from the visiting team. And at a certain point, it's diminishing returns on investment for the Red Sox. So that's kind of been the attitude for John Henry, and a big reason why they're not pumping money into getting a big bat, not willing to spend, even if they're willing to spend $165 million on Bregman, we're going to defer a lot of that money because inflation down the road, it's not going to cost as much then. And, we can't give him another 10 to 50 million more across 5 years and give it to him actually during the next 5 years because I don't know what reason. Because, the Chicago Cubs just care a little bit more than we do. I'm going to be on the plane to Liverpool. So, look, we want John Henry to succeed in these business ventures because the more revenue, or rather the more profit he's able to generate, the likelihood that he is able to pour more resources into the Red Sox, but it just doesn't seem like a priority. So I do think Henry, he shouldn't abandon this strategy. I know the calls for selling the team, that's not going to happen. Why would you sell the Boston Red Sox if you're still putting butts in seats, if you're still a profitable team, increasing profits year over year? It's just not going to happen. He's fine with the booing and all of that stuff. He hardly ever talks to the media. He runs away at times. So at this point, I think all we can do is root for John Henry to continue to diversify and find ways to bring in more profit, because then maybe he will, throw a bone to the Boston Red Sox a little bit more. And that's why I do have a bit of a recommendation here for John Henry. As we all saw in the Kentucky Derby and in the Belmont Stakes, Golden Tempo, really an incredible performance. I wish that horse ran the Preakness, but did an excellent job. Literally going from last place to first place in both the Derby and the Belmont, and a little upset. Like I say, he didn't run the Preakness. She didn't run. It's a he horse? I'm not sure. But that horse was definitely Triple Crown savvy. And I'm not saying that horse racing should be the space that John Henry goes into, but I think horses in general is a strong diversification strategy for John Henry. So if you've never heard of this sport, it's called dressage, which is short for horse ballet. And I think this is the ultimate solution for the Fenway Sports Group diversification strategy and finding a way to generate more profit so that maybe perhaps they can throw a bone to the Boston Red Sox and actually bring in a strong right-handed bat, not just in a midseason deal, but during the offseason when it comes to outbidding the other 29 MLB teams. Look at this sport. Look how exciting this is. Dressage, horse ballet. This was one of the best performances. Glitz and Glamourdale. I'm not sure which one's Glitz and which one's Glamourdale. I would assume the jockey or whatever you call it in dressage is one of those names. But I think there is a real untapped opportunity here for John Henry to diversify Fenway Sports Group and really expand that portfolio and bring in more I mean, look at the stands there. A ton of people into this. Would you watch this? Of course I would. I mean, this is much more exciting than horse racing. I think this is the better strategy and something that makes you really think that, hey, if John Henry is willing to make this investment in dressage, horse ballet, then perhaps I'm going to feel a little less bad at Fenway Park when I'm spending $18 for the Samuel Adams Thunder Hops beer or whatever it's called. $18, totally worth the price at Fenway Park if you know it's going not just to NASCAR, not just to ice hockey, not just to the Liverpool Football Club, which of course nobody in Boston or America actually cares about. There's been very little hype about the World Cup. I'm actually a little excited for the World Cup. But this is exciting. And this will have me saying, I don't need to spend $18. I'll make it a double. I'll spend $30 on a drink just so John Henry can have the money to invest in something as valuable and as high of an upside return as horse ballet. So I think this is ultimately the right move. John Henry, if you're listening, which I'm sure he is, horse ballet. I think that is the future of Fenway Sports Group. Maybe, you sell a stake in NASCAR, you sell a stake of the Pittsburgh Penguins, and you get in on this, and you find a way to make it work. Dressage, horse ballet, John Henry. I believe John Henry was also the name of a famous horse at one time. So a lot of parallels there. He's certainly in the twilight. He's over the hill, if you will, at this point in his life. Probably thinking a little bit about, the estate, the potential inheritance. And, if I'm in the will of John Henry, this is something that I want to inherit. I want to inherit. Look how graceful that is. Just incredible. This is the best of the best, by the way. This is as good as it gets in dressage. I wish I were John Henry's son, because this would be I would be pushing for this every single day for the Fenway Sports Group to continue to diversify and find a way to make the Fenway brand expand a little bit into the world of horses. Not horse racing, not the Kentucky Derby, Preakness or Belmont, none of that stuff. I think this is the untapped future. This isn't just ESPN 8, the Ocho material. This is NBC bidding hundreds of millions, perhaps billions for network coverage to cover dressage, horse ballet. I think, John Henry, you have a real amazing opportunity here to make this work out. So, really great to see that. And I do have an MBA, so I know what I'm talking about. And I think the more profit that John Henry can generate, the more, as I've said, he can put toward the Red Sox and getting that right-handed bat. Watch that horse and start thinking about trading for Mike Trout, right? That's what I watch that horse dance around, and I think Mike Trout. That's what I think. So hopefully, John Henry, you can listen to some of this advice and help bring the Red Sox back from the ashes, and that starts with horse ballet. But that's it for this episode of Boston Exile. What did we learn today? We learned that Drake May seems to be improving, especially with his red zone offense game. That Drake May and A.J. Brown have built up chemistry. Kayshon Boutte still showing up despite all of the background noise. Great to see. Christian Gonzalez, in a tough contract negotiation. Won't comment on it. Mike Vrabel won't comment on it. But we know it's tough, and he's still showing up at practice, even if it is in a limited fashion. And, of course, the Red Sox, 11 games under 500, but there is a sign of hope, and that starts not with firing Craig Breslow, not with revisiting the analytics and some of these decisions made by the front office or the lack of willingness from John Henry and ownership to be willing to spend money to improve the team, particularly the offense. What we ultimately learned is that there are some really sound diversification strategies that can help enable the Fenway Sports Group to start throwing money at high-end free agents, to be more willing to make trade deadline deals for big bats. No reason to trade Aroldis Chapman if you're acquiring Glitz and Glamourdale and some of the high-end dressage horses and really improving in that space. So that's what we learned today. I hope you learned as much as I did in this episode of Boston Exile. And if you're watching on YouTube, be sure to smash that like button, subscribe to this channel, hit the notification bell, or subscribe if you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. I'll be back at some point this week. Of course, we got a couple more Patriots Minicamp practices. I'm sure we're going to get lots of news out of that. More back shoulder throws to A.J. Brown. More talk about Christian Gonzalez and his contract, or lack thereof, and Kayshon Boutte continuing to contribute. Efton Chisholm, as I've been talking about, this is a guy to monitor. He is out-repping Kyle Williams. So far in OTAs, it was about even today, at minicamp. I think Efton Chisholm, we're all talking about the year 2 leap for Kyle Williams. I think Efton Chisholm could be your next Wes Welker, Julian Edelman style player. And I'm not just saying that because he's short and white. I'm saying that because Edelman, at the very least, had a similar start, special teams, kind of an unknown guy, working his way up, although Chisholm was undrafted, unlike Edelman. I think Chisholm is going to be the big splash in addition to A.J. Brown. And hopefully we have another splash coming with Stephon Diggs sometime soon. No rumors, really, about where Stephon Diggs might be going. I believe in the betting odds, the Baltimore Ravens seem to be the favorite. I've heard the Kansas City Chiefs thrown around. Don't let that happen. Don't let that happen. You have to play Kansas City this year. I do not want to see Stephon Diggs go off on you. You might end up facing the Ravens in the postseason. Bring back Stephon Diggs and make it work. But that's it for this episode of Boston Exile. I will